Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to look at some clips from Danny Jones' shows, previous episodes with Bart Ehrman, biblical scholar, Dan McClellan, another biblical scholar, and we're going to look at what their definitions are for these terms, neoniskos, which we've looked at before, leistes, which we've looked at before. But I actually pulled up the definition that Dan McClellan pulled up, the BDAG definition, biblical lexicon, and I don't know where they got this from. So we'll take a look at what the definitions are and how they vary from the other sources and other lexicons and definitions that we've looked at previously. So let's get into it.
What do you think of Amon's interpretation of the scene in the public park where Jesus was arrested at 4 a.m. with the kid?
Yeah, that's I think that's wildly overinterpreting things. There's just a kid with like a cloak on or some kind of piece of fabric. The idea there is that there was a kid who just had something wrapped around him to keep warm, and they were like, "Come here, kid," and they grabbed it, and he ran off, and they were left with the piece of fabric in his hand. Yeah, so you just see him scurrying away nude.
So I want you to take a look at how Dan McClellan right here explains Mark 14, 51, 52, and then we'll take a look at how Bart Ehrman explains Mark 14, 51, 52, and you notice the similarities between how they're both talking about this subject.
So the kid is only in Mark, but it's a strange story because it's this, they try and grab the guy and he's not
pull his towel
off. Young man. It's not, no, he's wearing a linen cloth. He's wearing like a robe or something, a linen robe. And they grab him and it says he's wearing a linen robe over his nakedness. They grab it and he runs away buck naked.
So you see how they're both trying to do the actions and grab him while he's got a robe on, which that doesn't say at all. So they're both doing the similar thing because they're both Bible scholars, so you would expect that from them. Now, the next thing I'm going to bring up is from a previous video which I did, which I explained what was the kid doing, what was the neoniskos doing, and why was he there? And what does it say, the lexicon says in the Greek? So let's take a look. Here it is, sunakolutheo, this is the verb for what the kid was doing. Following along with or closely accompanying. This is the LSJ lexicon, but I'm going to show you the New Testament lexicon. So right here, I was looking at the LSJ, so the standard lexicon for philologists, classicists. Now, it says sunakolutheo, which is the verb, so it says follow along closely or accompany. Follow with the mind or attend to, okay? Follow with the sense of obeying, number 4. Okay, so you've got accompanying, attending, and obeying. This isn't just a kid who was hanging around. This is someone who was attending to Jesus. And as you'll see, what the Greek English lexicon, the New Testament says, it was a slave. But I'm going to show you the New Testament lexicon of ancient Greek. It says neoniskos is used in Mark 14:51. That's what we're talking about. Used of a young attendant or servant. Now in our modern parlance, what is an attendant or a servant? You would call that a slave, wouldn't you? So he's wearing a sindon, a fine cloth, around his nakedness, okay? It's not a robe. So it isn't a robe. So the biblical scholars want to say he was wearing a robe and then he just got it pulled off him and then he ran away. Well, it actually says he left the bandage behind. Katalipon. It says he left it behind, not it was stripped off him, like they're saying. Now, this is the biblical lexicon, BDAG, what Dan McClellan brings up later, which we're going to look at with leistes. But let's take a look at the definition of neoniskos in BDAG, the biblical lexicon that they want to use. Now, what does it say? 1, relatively young man. Youth, young man. Okay, so we've been hearing a lot of people saying, and I've done videos on this before you can check out, it was a 30-year-old fit man, warrior-like man, and it's in the 30s and 40s, and it's man. It's like neoniskos. Iskos is diminutive, so it makes something smaller. So if neonias is a youth or young man, then a neoniskos is a small young man or younger young man. And this says it right here. The biblical lexicon says relatively young man, okay? What does that mean? Relatively, we'll have a look at that. Or youth. What's youth? Teenager, okay? Now, what else does it say? It says there are lists a series of age classes, paides, so children, little children, pheboi, neoniskoi, and equates, and that means that neoniskoi, with neos. We'll have a look at neos. Now, Matthew 19:20 and Mark 14:51. This is what it's saying. Mark 14:51. That's what we're looking at. And it also says the identity and significance of the neoniskos in Mark 16:5, which we've looked at before. That's in the Easter story further after Jesus is risen from the tomb. And there's a neoniskos in there in Mark 16:5. So they're saying that's the same neoniskos. The identity in Mark 14:51 and 16:5 is the same neoniskos. That's what I posited with my last videos. That's interesting that that's saying the same thing. Now, what does number 2 say? A young man functioning as a servant. Okay, servant. What have we been saying? It's a servant, it's a slave. That's what it says in the other lexicon, the Greek English lexicon we just looked at. It also says that Lucian, Alexander. That's what we're going to look at. We're also going to look at Lucian's Alexander the false prophet and what that says. And if we can compare Lucian's story with Jesus, and you're going to be very surprised. Let's take a look at the English definitions because that's what we're using. We've got to go through English. So relatively means to a certain degree when compared with other things of the same kind. So everyone who was in that space around the same time, he was relatively young compared to who else was there at the same time, or the other neoniskoi as well would have been relatively young compared to whoever else was there, like Jesus and everyone who came to arrest him. And also the definition of young, what does young mean? Young person, animal, or plant has not lived or existed for very long and is not yet mature. See, that's what we're focusing on. Not yet mature. So that means what? Around the age of puberty or teenagers when it's just onset, okay? So what does it say with neos? 1 says pertinent to being in existence but a relatively short time, or new or fresh. Okay, that's how they're describing these children, new or fresh. These neoniskoi. Neoniskos is a new or fresh young man, youth, okay? New or fresh. Now we're going to take a look at Hesychius, which we've seen before, just a short clip from a previous video. What Hesychius, the 5th, 6th century lexicographer, says about neoniskos and what that word equates to. As we've looked at, neoniskos equals anapios, according to Hesychius, right here. Now, what is anapios? Anapios, according to the Greek lexicon of the New Testament, is an infant or a little child. Okay, a minor, not of age. And then on the LSJ, it says an infant, child, a child from infancy, and of children up to puberty. So that's the age range we're talking about. We're talking about children around the time of puberty or becoming into that age. Okay, that's what it says. All the lexicon entries we've had a look at, that's what we're talking about. Now let's take a look at Bart Ehrman discussing Dan McClellan, and we'll have a look at the clips, and then we'll break a lot more down.
You know, dictionaries can't be trusted either.
Exactly. Well, that's one thing. I had a scholar on here who was telling we were discussing the word laistace, and we were looking it up on Perseus Tufts, exactly, and it gave us a couple definitions. I think one of them was robber, pirate, and robber. Yeah. And then this guy goes, "Oh no, that's the wrong dictionary." He goes, "You got to look at this dictionary. It says he's a revolutionary."
So when you look at the LSJ, we've seen it before many times, it does bring up pirate, robber. But when you look at the biblical definition, BDAG, what Dan McClellan brings up, this is what it says.
Robber, highwayman, bandit, revolutionary, insurrectionist, guerrilla.
Oh, that's not even here.
Yeah, where did you find the revolutionary?
So I'm looking in what scholars affectionately know as BDAG, which is a Greek English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature. So it isolates the usage of these words within early Christian literature to show how they're being used in those contexts.
Yeah, but wouldn't that kind of be a biased translation? If Jesus is saying he's not a laistace, they wouldn't want Jesus to be saying he's not a predator. They would want him to be saying he's not a revolutionary.
Well, so that's problematic. He's problematic if he's saying that because it means both things in different contexts.
All three things: pirate, robber, and revolutionary.
It was a biblical dictionary.
Of course it was.
A Bible that's dictionary. The problem. Right, exactly. So that's the main problem with it, right?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, because right. So that is a main problem.
Did you see how he laughed so hard at that? And I'm like, wait, you're a biblical scholar laughing at another biblical scholar bringing up the biblical definition of a laistace to say it doesn't count. Yeah, I just thought that was hilarious and interesting. Like, and look how he changes his tone so quickly to be like, oh, hang on a minute.
Of course it was.
Well,
that's the problem.
Right, exactly. So that's the main problem with it, right?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, because... Right.
Right there. You see it right there. All right, let's go on.
because a dictionary of biblical Greek is kind of like a dictionary of New York Times today's edition English. But if you move outside the corpus of the New Testament into broader Greek, then you want to know what leistes means.
Yeah.
Because that might affect what it actually means in the New Testament, and it actually does. So it means all of those things.
So we will look at all the definitions of leistes, leistai, kakurgoi, all these different definitions we've looked at before, because we'll look at what the New Testament actually says, which I've shown before with Bart Ehrman's video. Take a look here. I'll post it here. What does it actually say with the word leistes, and where are they getting their definition from with BDAG? Because it's horrendous what they've done, and I'll show you exactly what they've done. But he's saying here, you can't just use that definition to pull out what you want. I'm like, okay, don't cherry pick. Look at the context of the situation. Okay. And I showed this context, which we'll have a look at a clip.
It means all of those things.
So if Jesus was in the park with a kid at 4 a.m. or whatever it was in the middle of the night, and the SWAT team pulls up on him and he goes, "Why are you pulling up on me like I'm some leistes?" Like, what is he probably saying here?
Yeah, well, he doesn't say that in Mark. He says that in John.
Like, he had 3 gospels to choose from, and he got the one gospel, John, that doesn't say Hosepi Leistein. Matthew, Mark, and Luke say Hosepi Leistein. He picked the one gospel that doesn't say that, and he says Mark doesn't say it, and they're separate. It doesn't say Leistes and the kids in that one. He has absolutely no idea what the hell the Bible says, and he's a Bible scholar.
The kid is one story. The leistes is in a different story.
Wrong.
Mark 14:48. Jesus answered and said to him, have you come upon me as a leistes with swords in order to arrest me?
Right. So, like,
Swords
out
and
of all the
clubs to arrest
definitions
me.
we have, obviously he's not saying, why are you pulling up on me like I'm a pirate? Like, why would you be a pirate at 1 a.m.?
Yeah, or a robber. It's talking about being an insurrectionist.
You hear that? It's talking about being an insurrectionist. Where's he getting that from? Like, what? We just saw Dan McClellan pull it up, and Danny was like, hey, where are you getting this from? Yeah, it's from BDAG. Why? And I'll show you.
An insurrectionist.
Yeah.
Is it true that Jesus said, "I'm not a leistes"?
I don't know which part he's talking about.
When the people came to arrest him, the cops, when they got there and they had all their weapons, and he was like in a state of mania. He says Jesus was like, he was overwhelmed and he was in this state of mania, and he said, "I am not a leistes."
That's something that can be interpreted a variety of ways as well. It's not indicative of any kind of enhanced or alternate state or anything like that.
So as I've shown before, here it is. Mark up the top, Luke in the middle, and Matthew down the bottom. All 3 say, Hosepi Leistein. Why'd you come out like I'm a leistes with these heavy weapons to arrest me? And Bart picked the one that doesn't have it. John, what an idiot. Now, this is when he's in Gethsemane. You can see up here, second line, first word, Gethsemane. And he's with his mathetais, his students, Peter, Jacob, James, Ioannin, John, with them. And he is ektham beistai kai hademonein. So look at the 2 definitions. So ademoneo is on the top. So he is sorely troubled or dismayed, and he's in anguish. Okay. And then ektham beo on the bottom, the verb, to be amazed or in amazed and astonished. So what could be putting Jesus in this state of being sorely troubled, anguish, and amazement? Do you think that's a normal dude walking around not having anything going on mentally? Like Dan just said, it means there's nothing going on. So it's not indicative of being in any kind of enhanced or altered state. Anguish and amazement, astonishment. At what? At what? And he falls over in the garden. Don't forget, he falls over and he's in this state as well. Something's going on.
State or anything like that.
He says that the word leistes means human trafficker. And he says that human traffickers were also everywhere in that time period. He says
so he laughs it off initially, and then he accepts the reality straight after. What?
There was pirates, there was traffickers. I mean, even he said Julius Caesar was captured by human traffickers. Julius Caesar's account, he actually calls these guys leistes.
Now you can see the word down the bottom, leistas. So we'll have a look at that. So that's the word that Caesar was using, Julius Caesar was using to say, hey, these are the people who are hanging out, pirates, The ones that captured me. And then what does he do? He goes and crucifies them.
The lace die or something like that. And then he goes and crucifies these guys that captured him when he gets ransomed and catches them. You know, why is this guy saying I'm not a lay stace, which means I'm not a human trafficker, when this boy is with him and the boy runs away? And then he goes and then he says the next day he's crucified in between two other lay stace. He says the guys that were crucified next to him were human traffickers.
So that's exactly right. We can look at Matthew, Mark, and Luke again, where I've shown before, and I'll show you the clip. Who was he with when he was crucified, and what are they called?
Who were the guys that were crucified on each side of him? What were their charges?
We're not told.
Here in Matthew 27:38, in the Greek, it says duo leistai, two other leistai. Mark 15:27, duo leistas. Three separate gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, say that he's crucified with either two leistai or two kakugoi. So you can see here in Mark, where it says duo leistas, that's the same ending and the same looking word. That's the same word, leistas, that Caesar used, or that Plutarch used for Caesar, where it's right here, leistas, same word, duo leistas, traffickers, pirates, same thing. And then we have kakugoi here, which we'll have a look at the definition of, because we'll have a look at a later text with Lucian, Alexander the false prophet. We'll have a look at that text.
So I know that the terms, when it's talking about so human trafficking wasn't a word that they use to describe the criminals. I think in the later text it calls them thieves, but they're brigands. It was basically it's sedition that was punishable by
Sedition.
Crucifixion. Yeah.
What does that mean?
So that's trying to revolt against the state. They would have been people who were probably revolutionaries or people who were attacking the Roman rulers or things like that. I know thieves is not right.
That's good. He acknowledged that that I've shown before in previous videos when I showed the differences between the English and the Greek with the King James Version, that the word thief is an incorrect translation for the words that is used here with leistai, leistas, and kakugoi. It is not a thief. At least he even recognizes that it is an incorrect translation in the English version. But here's the division.
But they're brigands. It was basically it's sedition.
See, this is the division. They try and say, it's a seditionist. Jesus was being a seditionist. They were crucified. They were called seditionists, treasonous, rebels. But we'll have a look, as I've shown before. The word for seditionist is not the word we just saw, leistais, leistas, leistai, kakugoi. It's not the same word. So where are they getting this idea from?
Not right.
There it is. I found it.
That's the word right there.
This is the Greek actual spelling. It's funny. It says predator. Yeah.
Whoa.
Leistais. That's how it's spelled
Predator.
in English.
If Jesus is saying he's not a leistais, they wouldn't want Jesus to be saying he's not a predator. They would want him to be saying he's not a revolutionary.
Now, I'll show you a clip of a previous video where I break down what Hesychius, a 5th, 6th century lexicographer, said about the word leistai and what he equated these words to, and how close it is to the things we're dealing with in this video. Pirates, Julius Caesar, peiratai, kakugoi, leistai. Okay, let's take a look. So here we have Hesychius, leistai. Is it equal to peiratai? Peiratai, kakugoi. Oh, that's the word we just saw, isn't it? Kakugoi. He was crucified with two kakugoi. And the other one said two leistai. So a peiratai is equal to a kakugoi and a leistai. Now what's a peirates? A pirate, one who makes attempts or attacks on ships. And in earlier Greek, it was a leistais. Kakugia means the character and conduct of a kakurgos, which is the ill-doing, do wickedness and villainy and malicious shit. These are the people that Jesus is crucified with. Doesn't sound like insurrectionists, does it? Sounds like people who do really up shit.
But what's it got to do with the kid?
Okay, so now we're going to go into what it has to do with neoniskos, all right? Because these words equate in a way that it will be so much clearer what that boy was doing with Jesus when you look at this, if you haven't seen this before. Kentaro is also identified by Hesychius as equal to leistai and of paiderastai. Now, what does that mean? Paiderastes, right there. You know what we're talking about. There's the equating these words together, kentaroi, leistai, paiderastes. So we're talking about what was Jesus doing, saying, hey, I'm not a leistais. And we can look at contextually a bit later with Lucian, and we can pick out the similarities to Jesus' story, and you will see, hang on a minute, this guy who's supposed to be a Laestes and a terrible person, Alexander, is talking about and doing the same things Jesus was doing. Lucian was writing about it just after the Gospels were written. Okay, so this is contemporary sources.
To be carried off as booty, to be won by force, a pirate or a robber.
Okay, now we've had a look at all the definitions and everything that was happening. So let's look now at the definition that Dan brought up, which is Laestes from the BDAG, from the biblical definition. Now, number one, robber, highwayman, bandit in Palestine. So number one, robber, highwayman, bandit. Number two, this is where it comes all to fruition. Where the hell did they pull this from? Because nowhere in any other lexicon we've ever looked at does a Laestes mean a revolutionary or an insurrectionist or a guerrilla. Okay, now look what they pull. You see Barabbas right here. Now this is Mark 15:7, and what do they say? Meta ton stasiaston. Okay, we've looked at this before. Mark 15:7. What the fuck are they doing putting stasiaston, which has nothing to do with the Laestes, under the definition of Laestes in the BDAG, in the Biblical Definition Dictionary? What the fuck are they doing? This has nothing to do. Barabbas was with the stasiaston, the insurrectionists. That is not the same word as a Laestes. So whoever did this lexicon, these biblical people who did this lexicon, are absolutely making this shit up to fit their own definitions. So Jesus looks like a revolutionary or an insurrectionist against the government, when they're not even using the same word that they're giving for the definition of Barabbas. Because what is a stasiaston? Right here. This is Mark 15:7. Barabbas meta ton stasiaston. And what does it say in English? Barabbas was bound with those who had made insurrection. Okay? Stasiaston. Stase. Insurrection. Not leistai. Leistas. Kakulgoi. What the text says. And this is Josephus in Antiquities of the Jews, which I've shown you before. Because Bart Ehrman brought it up. And look what it says. He said, he's talking about meaning an insurrectionist. Well, Josephus says Stasiastes is an insurrectionist, not Laestes. So what are they doing? Lying to you to create this false narrative to say Jesus is a revolutionary insurrectionist. When Laestes, it's actually trisyllabic, so Laestes, you can see it right here. Laes, and I've got other sources I can show you that prove that. It's a trisyllabic. So Laestes, what are they doing saying a revolutionary is a Laestes? Because it doesn't say that. It's a stasiaston. And what does it say? And look what it says right here. Probably also in the words of Jesus, Matthew 26:55, Mark 14:48, and Luke 22:52. That's all the bits that we've just looked at. All the passages that say, Hosepi Leistain, why'd you come out here with all these heavy weapons? These are the three passages. Why would they say probably also? Why would he be saying that? This is the big lie. These three passages also probably in the words of Jesus do not say he's a revolutionary insurrectionist. Makes no sense. Laestes as a pyrorastes, according to Hesychius, makes so much more sense, because if he is saying I'm not a pyrorastes while he's arrested with a naked young boy slave, that makes more sense than saying he's a revolutionary insurrectionist while he's arrested in a park while he's falling over and stunned and amazed. This is it right here. This is the lie. Revolutionary insurrectionist. And this is how they get away with this. Putting in factually incorrect definitions under words that have nothing to do with each other in ancient Greek. Because you can see right here, peirates, peiratai, kakulgoi, all the same words we're looking at. Later word for Laestes, okay? Nothing to do with stasiastes, one who stirs up sedition. Okay, that's not a pirate. That's not a pederast. And it says Mark 15:7. Okay, stasiaste. You can't equate these two words, but the Bible scholars are doing that because their biblical definitions say it when it has nothing to do with each other. That's how they fucked us. That's how they fucked everyone. So let's go and look at Lucian for some context with Jesus now.
The context that Lucian uses to describe this guy Alexander the false prophet as this terrible, tyrannical Laestes who's trafficking people and using them as like putting them into like prostitution rings and all kinds of stuff. I think he's using that for the main historical context for that passage in Mark where Jesus says, "I'm not a Laestes."
Yeah, that's.
So that wouldn't be relevant to what was going on the ground. And
in this clip, I think he acknowledged after the podcast, but in this clip, he thought, because Danny said it was earlier than Jesus, he didn't know when Lucian was. So he said it has nothing to do with each other because Lucian was, what, a century before or 2 centuries before Jesus, and it's a completely different work of literature.
No,
That part of the world.
200 plus years later, and a different part of the world, and a different type of literature altogether.
So this is saying he was 125 to 180 AD.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So roughly about 100 years and change after.
Less than that for the actual composition of the Gospels. 70 CE to maybe 125 CE.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's
So around the
it's
same
closer
time.
in time. Yeah, it's much similar, but
Oops. Okay, so we're going to look at Lucian now. And what does it say? Now, look at this word. While he was still a mere boy. Now, what does it say? Merakion. Now, what's a merakion? Merakion is talking about these terms that we've been looking at with the young boys, youth, the neoniskos, because it's talking about age ranges. When these boys get to a certain age range, they become almost men. That's why they define them like this: a boy, a lad, a stripling. Merakion. Now, what does that mean? Now, that's an English word from the 14th century. So what we can deduce from this is better. And it says it's a boy of about 14 years old. And when you look at the English on stripling, you can see some of them, they say it's under 20 years old, or it's in the teenage years, or it can be 10 to 14, depending on what time and context you're looking at. So we're still looking at what I was looking at before with the ancient Greek with Hesychius. So we're still looking at around the teenage years, either early or mid-teenager. We're looking at for Merakion, Neoniskos, this age range, okay? Now, who is he and what does he do? Because this is very interesting. If you've watched any of my previous videos, or if you've looked at any of the apocryphal text or any stuff outside the Bible, you will see that these words are used a lot. Now, look what they're using. They're talking about enchantments. They're talking about miraculous incantations, charms for your love affairs. Okay? Where have we seen that before? We have seen that in the apostles themselves' text. The text of the apostles themselves, the Didache, that the apostles themselves were writing about. Our followers, who are the followers of Jesus, their followers need to stop having sex, stop doing drugs, stop using charms and love potions. Okay, they're telling their followers to stop doing this stuff because they got caught. Jesus got caught, so they're telling their followers to stop doing this stuff, okay? This is the first thing I noticed. And that's the same thing the apostles are talking about, and they're writing about at about the same time. So this is all contemporary with what's happening with the apostles and what they're writing about Jesus in the Gospels and other texts that are happening around the same time. Now you can see here up the top, I've got highlighted kakian because that's based on the same root of the word kakugos, who Jesus was crucified with. Kakugoi to kakugoi. This says Alexander of Philip, and he was into some wicked stuff. That's what it says. He was a wicked person, okay? A villainous person. Now the next bit is in the Greek, so is in the English, so you can have a look at. They're quoting Homer, and it says, "Many a drug that was good in a compound, and many a bad one." Now that's Homer's quote, and then it says, Lucian says, "all of which Alexander inherited and took over." So they were notorious, have been followers of the notorious Apollonius. So there's a notorious person that they're following. So this is who we're talking about. Someone who's doing wicked things, and he is in the drug trade, the ancient drug trade, and he is inheriting it and taking over the drug trade that he was being groomed to be a part of, to take over. So we've got wickedness. We've got drugs. What else have we got? He was a servant. He himself was professedly a public physician. Okay? Physician. What's Jesus? Healer. Physician. Ear. In Greek, it means a healer and physician. You got to look at these things. It's all connected. And now what's he doing? Let's look at what he's actually doing. Because it says, look, he's sending men abroad to create rumors in different nations in regard to the oracle, and to say that he made predictions, discovered fugitive slaves, like, and then there's another word here, kleptas and leistas, which means thieves and pirates or robbers or traffickers, depending on the context and who wants to translate this properly. Now, let's look at this. He healed the sick. Does that sound familiar? He healed the sick. And in some cases, he actually raised the dead. Come on. This is exactly the same thing as Jesus is doing. He's a servant, or he's got servants, slaves, as we call. He's into the drugs. He's raising people from the dead and healing the sick. He's doing sacrifices and votive offerings. What else? What else is he doing? Oh, they saw great serpents. Okay, now we get serpents. Now it's not ophis, which, look at the word. It's a drakontas. So Paidios, there we go. We've got children and we've got dragons. Okay, we've got dragons and we've got kids. And what does it say? There they saw great serpents, quite tame and gentle, so that they were kept by women, slept with children, let themselves be stepped on, were not angry when they were stroked, and took milk from the breast just like babies. Okay, they bought one of the finest reptiles. So he's dealing with drugs, serpents, healing, raising people from the dead. And who else did things like that? Oh, look, Mark 16:18. Jesus said, you're going to lift up snakes and drink the death-inducing drugs. Okay? Thanasimon. And how do we know it's a drug? Because Josephus at the same time is writing pharmakon mete thanasimon, death-inducing drugs. Jesus, death-inducing drugs. Look how this is all connected. When I first read this, I was like, oh my God, you could just slap the name Jesus on this work and it's doing all the same stuff. Wickedness, drugs, servants, physician, healing, raising people from the dead, serpents, dragons. So this is the context we have, as I've just shown you, for what a lay stace is contextually, based on the sources we have, contemporary sources around the same time that speak of the exact same things that Jesus was doing, okay? And he's claiming not to be one of these people when he was arrested with a naked boy. Slave. Let's not forget, it's a slave. So this is how the biblical scholars create a complete fiction with their own definitions. And this is how I, and a bunch of other people who are doing this work now as well, are showing you how these biblical scholars are full of shit and they're making stuff up to get you to believe a story that never happened. Read the original text. Stop looking at the biblical lexicon, this one particularly, because it's factually incorrect.